Sometimes starting the podcast is the hardest thing we do. So how are you guys?
Great. I'm fantastic, Mike.
Good. Yeah. Are you really fantastic, Josh?
Can you hear me? Well, since you can see, right here is about numb from some dental work I had this morning. And so I tried. I talked to my dentist, Dr. Dillon, this morning. I was like, hey, look, I'm shooting a podcast at 9:30. I'd like to do the procedure without the numbing shot. And he looked at me and he was like, ugh. So he touched it one time and I jumped. He said, you're getting a shot.
Yeah.
So here we are, numb face. We're going to make it happen.
It's waking up as we go. So
well, at least we got your good side facing the camera. So
hey, thanks for saying I have a good side. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's awesome.
But the bad side's facing me. So
good luck.
Well, hey, it's good to have you guys on the podcast today. I missed you last week.
We missed you, Mike.
Yeah, but
Mark did okay.
Too, so
Mark did okay, and
Shay was spectacular. Yeah. That's always though. So that's par for that course.
I'm continue to be really thankful for this series that we find ourselves in, and I think the chord that it's striking with people in our church. I saw it again Sunday. We got to the end of the service, and you just see the response in people, and you could kind of feel it in the room.
You've touched a nerve.
Yeah. And so I'm really thankful that, and then we got to life groups and more conversation. And I heard a lot of people just express how refreshing it is that we would talk about a topic like this in the context of a church.
Yeah. We heard the same thing in our group. In fact, several mentioned that they've never heard this topic preached about. And they've been in church for most of their life. And this was the first time that they can remember actually hitting it directly, head on.
Specifically, there were several in our life group that talked about how appreciative they were for your vulnerability, just to speak openly about, some of your struggles with this. And even on, the medication, because that's another thing you talked about. That medication, there's not only does the topic of mental health come with a stigma and counseling and all that, but medication for these types of things also carry a real stigma for people.
And it's real, like even just getting into the medication piece, and it's so crazy how even if we say, I'm going to do away with that stigma, or I'm going to be a part of the change of that stigma, it still lives in us. It's ingrained because I have been prescribed medication at different points in my life over the last 20 years. And either I would take it or not take it. But that was never the crux of any kind of feeling I would have. It would be when I went to the pharmacy to pick it up. Because generally, as a pastor, we generally know most people, and we tend to do business with people who are in our faith family, which I think is right. And so when I walk up and I know the pharmacist and I know the pharmacy and it's one thing, I guess, to go get my blood pressure medicine or to go get whatever. But to walk up and say, hey, I need my Lexapro refilled.
Feels different.
And I know it's fine. And in no way are they looking at me judgmentally, but I think.
But you feel it.
You know that I'm broken now. Like there's something that you now know about me that I can't hide anymore. Which I think is that stigma. And so now, years later, being on Lexapro, and now just walking, I'm like, guys, I need it. Like, hurry. We need whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
We need to go ahead and have that on auto refill. So it is a unique thing that still lives. It still lives in us.
Yeah, but that is the unique part of it, right? You'll walk in to get any other medication and not really think much about it. I can't say any others, maybe some others, but for the most part, you go get your medication, don't think anything about it, and there are certain things, though, you're like, that person now somehow sees deeper into me. Like, by me getting this medication, they know that I'm struggling.
That's right.
In a way that feels different from my other health struggles.
That's right. Yep.
Which should not be the case.
It shouldn't be the case.
But to your point, it often is.
So for those watching, if you haven't already figured this out, the topic today is mental health, and so I want to. We're already kind of going there, but let's talk about for a minute why this topic and mental health struggles, one maybe are so prevalent in faith communities, but also why there's such a stigma attached to it in our churches. And maybe, and is the stigma felt more in the church setting than it is in just, the general population?
I think it often is. And when you look at the differences of those who maybe don't go to church, those who do go to church, it's pretty similar in terms of the prevalence and what we struggle with. And that makes sense because we're all human, right? Whether you go to church or not, you're still a human. Your body is still affected by the same things. You're still going to struggle with many of the same things. And so, but I think historically, the church has tended to view things that related to mental illness or mental health as more of a spiritual issue.
That's right.
If you go back in the history of the church and the history even of mental illness, there were times where it was really seen to be more of a demonic thing. And then maybe it's not demonic, but it's certainly a spiritual element in terms of praying more or just a weak faith or things like that. And so to the point of stigma, I think for people who are not part of the faith family, they don't see it that way, so they don't think about it as much in the stigma. For those who go to church, I think there's a pressure a lot of times that we have to have it all together, and certainly we're not supposed to struggle on an ongoing basis. Certainly we can struggle with something that just pops up, a situation that we're navigating, but ongoing we shouldn't. And because many mental health issues are more ongoing, people feel that, I think, differently. So historically, we've not done a great job within faith families of navigating this.
And it's maybe because we didn't know, and you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
And why knowledge is power. When you look at data, and data is so important for us. And I love that we have institutes of medicine or institutes of research that aren't Christian in nature running these studies, and our Christian institutions of research are also running these studies. And the data is the same. And what that tells us is that these issues of mental health isn't just a thought process disorder where, well, if you think wrongly about it, then you will have, X, Y, and Z diagnoses. And then if you think rightly, then those things tend to either go away or you'll never deal with those. No, it is a core issue of brokenness in the same way that the prevalence of headaches between non-Christian and Christian are the same. The prevalence of cancer between non-Christian and Christian are the same. Mental health is the same way because it is part of our broken body. And so when we treat it, yes, there is certainly a spiritual aspect in the same way that when we get diagnosed with something we really don't want or we want to be different, we beg God and we pray and we ask people to join around us. Mental health is very much the same way. It's part of our broken body that needs to be addressed holistically.
And I like that holistic word because we tend to not think of it that way. But in other areas of our life, you take, someone with a family history of heart disease, is stress going to be worse for that person than someone without that family history? Probably so. So stress is not the only factor. There's a genetic factor that they have to address as well. But hopefully if they're meeting with a doctor, they may say, hey, you may need this, you may need some medication, but let's talk about your stress level and what that's doing to your body. So the body is so complex. I mean, when you think about how God has created us, it's pretty amazing just to think of how it all works together. And when it's working right, it is a beautiful thing. When it's not quite working right, because we are all impacted by sin and by the fall, all of our bodies are impacted by that now. So when it's not working right, it's still incredible in the way that it works, but it's just the opposite direction. And the interplay between maybe genetics and our biology and things that we really didn't get a say in, we came into the world with it. Things like trauma that, again, often happen somewhere along the way in life that we didn't necessarily choose. It happened in our life. Stress and things like that, even down to things that maybe a college student abusing alcohol, and then they're down a road of addiction. It's all intermingled. And I think we oversimplify it sometimes and try to make it just this or just this or just this when it's way more complex.
Yeah, and Josh, you spoke to that in your message, just the fact that, in our response or care, self-care and is in the holistic approach being so important. And, a lot of the questions we're going to address today are probably going to feel more directed to you, Preston, because you're our resident counselor and you deal with these things all the time. But, let's talk for a minute. I mean, so you use the First Kings passage, talking about Elijah, and you pointed out that God's first response to Elijah was not, it was not a correction.
That's right.
It was a caring response.
Yeah, that's right.
And really, before anything else, it was, hey, eat,
That's
sleep,
right.
rest.
Right. That's
right.
You know, so how important is it, the connection between physical health
Yeah.
and our mental health?
It's critical. It's critical. In fact, many of the people that I work with, if they come in and they're in the midst of the struggle right at that moment, one of the first questions I'm going to ask always is going to be about things like that. How are you sleeping? Often they'll say, I'm not sleeping very well. To their surprise, I think sometimes my first response in kind of their homework is, we've got to get you sleeping, because until your sleep gets lined out, everything else is going to be harder, and everything else is going to feel worse. If you're struggling with anxiety, you're going to be anxious about more things to a higher degree. If you're struggling with depression, you're going to be more depressed about more things. So we want to get your sleep worked out right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Sleep deprivation really, it just wreaks havoc. If you've ever traveled, maybe you've been overseas or done something where you've got jet lag coming back, you know what it's like to be like here. I'm physically here, but my brain just cannot
foggy.
focus. It's foggy. I'm not making good decisions. I can't think straight. Some people kind of live life almost with that fog because they're not sleeping well. So sleep is a huge one. You mentioned movement, which I appreciate, because that's another. Again, just thinking about how the body's wired, when we are moving, our body's actually producing chemicals that help us to feel better.
That's right.
When we're not moving,
That's right.
it's not producing those chemicals.
That's right.
And so sometimes people will hear that and they'll think, oh, I've got to sign up for a marathon or some massive thing. And it's usually not that. It's usually, hey, if you're not doing anything, then let's just try getting out and going for a walk around your block.
Yeah.
And if you're already doing that, then maybe let's bump it up a little bit. There's a lady I've been working with that part of her homework was joining the gym. And she did. And she began to feel better because of the movement,
That's right.
but also because of the community. There's often a community element involved in that. And she began to feel that. So sleep, definitely. Movement, high priority. Nutrition, you mentioned nutrition. The things that our body does in our stomach, amazingly, is very
gut-brain connection.
connected. Exactly. We call it our second brain. Some are actually saying in many ways it may be our first brain.
That's right.
Many of our neurotransmitters are impacted by what we eat and by what happens in our stomach. And so we think, it's a brain thing because I don't have the neurotransmitters. Well, maybe, but some of that starts actually in the stomach.
That's right. And we'll take and again, hear me out. I'm a medicine proponent. We'll do the SSRIs or the SNRIs, and those things are helpful to whatever you're doing with your serotonin or norepinephrine and all of those things in your brain. But a lot of the data is now pointing to the things that we are eating, the gut microbiome is actually the thing that is going to the quickest help your dopamine levels shoot up when you need to have that feeling of, man, this feels great, or your serotonin to level you off. And that's what I've learned as kind of my journey, just a little bit of personal privilege on the microphone. Anxiety is my first diagnosis, and then depression follows it, right? So it's the comorbidity of anxiety and depression together. But it's always feeling anxious, and weirdly, when you're anxious and depressed, the last thing you want to do is move, right?
Oh yeah.
And for me, the first thing I want to do is soothe. And the way I soothe is I eat. And the thing that I want to soothe myself in eating is generally something deliciously carb and sugar filled, which is the worst thing for the gut microbiome. And so I had to learn all this and still trying to put a lot of this into practice. But my counselor made the point that you need sleep. And I was like, Doc, I'm not tired at night. And he goes, that's the point. You've got to move your body to where you are exhausted enough, like there's nothing left in the tank, that you can actually lay down and those anxious thoughts are there, not just your anxious body being fed by the thoughts. And so that's one of the reasons that I kind of got back into the gym the way that I was doing, in a sense of not lifting heavy like I'm a bodybuilder, because I'm certainly not, and those days are over. But more cardio, and not cardio like, again, running a mile. It's literally walking slow, putting on a podcast and just going as far as I can.
Walking is one of the best exercises.
Until my legs hurt. I'm like, you know what? Done. Tank's empty enough. Let's go home and not eat ice cream.
That's right.
But let's take a bite, and then we're going to eat some broccoli to go with it.
But, that's so important, too, even as you think about going to sleep at night, because we tend to think my mind's racing and it's just a thought thing, right? But again, what the research is showing is, no, your whole body is racing. You've got chemicals floating around from the day because of how we're living the day. that you can't just lay down at night and shut those off because you're not thinking about
That's
it.
right.
Whether you're trying to think about it or not, your body still has to do something with all these, with cortisol and all the other things that are happening. And so the rhythm of our day, the just the way that we treat our bodies throughout the day is not independent of us laying down and going to bed at night. We can't live this way and then say, well, I just want to lay down and go to bed at night. Our phones, how many times do people lay in bed and doom scroll, right?
Yep.
And that whole time you're doing that, you are sending signals to your brain and to your body that don't say, hey, let's rest up here. They say, let's gear up. Let's get ready because the world's falling apart.
That's right.
And apparently I'm not doing very well compared to everybody else in the world that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And then we try to turn it off and go straight to bed.
That's right. One of the lines I think resonated yesterday weirdly that I did not think would because it was a riffing moment, but it was, put your phone down, put your CPAP on, go to sleep. I didn't realize how many people were actually using a CPAP nowadays, but we all have our Tom Cruise and Top Gun moment where we strap in for the night. And it's one thing to do that, another thing to put your phone down and actually close your eyes, say your prayers, and man, just drift off.
That's right.
It is amazing, I think, as I just listen to all this. And I think I've sort of experienced this in my own journey, but how interconnected all these things are: sleep and diet, and and mental health, and all those things. Like they're you said they're not independent of one another.
Yeah, and they're often cyclical, and that if we're not sleeping well, then we're not doing well during the day, and we have more anxious thoughts, and then we have more anxious thoughts, so we don't sleep as well,
exactly
and then we're stuck in that pattern.
So one of the things that Josh, you address is the fact that for some people it's like, hey, mental health is just a spiritual issue, and you're not praying enough, or and so I think what would we say to those who feel maybe guilty or feel like they don't have enough faith because they might be struggling with some type of mental health issue.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I always talk to people about, because we do have at the Counseling Center, at the Center for Hope and Healing, we have a lot of people who come who are people of faith. Not everyone. We have people that come from all walks of life and all areas. Many of those who come are not members here at Broadmoor, which is great. We want to be here for the community, but many do want to address faith issues. And so helping people to understand that you don't separate your faith out from your mental health and your mental illness or any struggles in that area. It does come to play on it, and it should be a part of the process of moving forward. We should certainly pray about it. We should certainly seek God's word for direction, for comfort, for encouragement, all of those things. But we have to be careful not to fall into the trap of, well, if I'm struggling, it's a faith issue alone. If I just had a strong enough faith, if I just had if I just prayed more, maybe I've been praying for years. I hear that fairly often, right? I have prayed for years for this to be removed. You use Paul's illustration of the thorn in the flesh. Sometimes we pray for things that are not removed.
Right.
But just as we would not look at a physical ailment, a physical illness, and say, well, that's only a faith issue. So headaches, if you've had headaches, you just need to pray more, right?
Right.
Don't take the Tylenol.
Yeah, that's right.
Just pray more. We now see through science, through, again, not just science in the secular world, but science being done by Christians, neuroscientists that are studying these things, that there is a brain physical component, gut component for all of these things that we're talking about that has to be addressed. And so we have to be able to look at it as a both and. Is there a spiritual component? Yes, there often is, but it is not the totality of what's going on here. So let's address spiritual things, which may be, again, how do we as believers walk by faith when there's something that God's not answered the way that we want to? That's a spiritual thing. But that doesn't mean that it's a spiritual reason that we're still anxious. There may be something else going on physiologically. Brain imaging, that's another big one. As we have been able to study the brains in ways that in the past we just didn't have the technology to do it, we now can actually put brain images up and see the difference between a relatively healthy brain and a brain where someone is struggling with a mental illness. And there are not just mind differences, there are physical differences with the structure of the brain in those two scenarios. And so looking at that, we go, okay, well, if this part of the brain has been impacted structurally, that's the part of the brain that controls this process. it makes sense that there's going to be a difference there. So the more we learn about it, the more we see, again, just the complexity of it. And I think it has given us the ability to say, no, it's not just a spiritual issue. This is what's going on in your body.
Do you think, Dr. Preston Crow, PhD, do you think that the reason a lot of times we attribute any sort of mental illness, even just being in the name of the mind, right? A mind illness, as primarily or even singularly spiritual, because for the most part, we have relegated our spiritual life to the mind. Whether we are just thinking on or using our mind to pray about, that somehow in the spiritual world, or at least in the Christian world, we'll use that spiritual, kind of sounds new agey. What we use in the Christian world, we sometimes differentiate between the body and the mind, and the Lord is after the mind. This was the wrong way to think about it, but it is the way we do. That the Lord is after the mind, and so you want to change your life, change your thinking. Like we get that, but then your body is just yours to do with whatever you want, which kind of gets us into the trouble that we, until we understand them as interconnected, it gets us in trouble, because we will say, oh, well, I love the Lord because I think and I pray, and maybe the connection to the body of, like, I journal, so I use my hand to write out a thought that's there. But then, coming from the Southern Baptist life, and a little bit tongue in cheek, if my tongue could actually do that at the moment, but it can't. But truly, like coming from a church background where we'll preach a sermon on holiness and then go eat dinner on the grounds after and consume 10,000 calories of fried chicken, and Lord bless this food, let it be a nourishment to our bodies, that we may be a service unto you. It's the craziest thing that it's disconnected. But if we ever understood it as not just connected, but it is intricately interconnected, does that then change the way in which we approach God, not just with our mind, but also with our body and our soul? And your counseling, do you see a move in that direction as we have a better understanding, as you're talking about with all of these imaging?
I do. I think, especially in the realm of, I'm going to use the word Christian counseling, which is a little bit of a misnomer because people define it differently. But for people who do counseling and approach it from more of a spiritual Christian standpoint, biblical standpoint, we've seen movement over the years in that area from a time where the body, which includes the brain, was very seldom talked about. This was more of what they would have said, a mind issue of what you think about, what you fill your mind with, where you focus your thoughts, that type thing. But in more recent years, you have had more and more people stepping into it and saying, wait, we have left out a component of who we are. God put us here in a physical body. It was designed to work perfectly. Right out of the gate, because of sin, the body does not work the way that it should. And again, sometimes we think of that more as the body doesn't work the way that it should, which is why we might have diabetes or cancer or things like that. Well, that also means the brain doesn't work the way that it should, which is why we have certain things that are really more brain induced. The body doesn't work the way that it should, so some of our neurotransmitters don't get created the way that they should. It is all, again, so woven together. And I would encourage anyone who may find themselves struggling with mental health, and maybe we'll come back and differentiate mental health and mental illness, but wherever you fall on that spectrum, there needs to be a holistic approach to how you're going to work through this. I don't think we're ever going to get there by saying, I will just do this and not affect or not address this other issue.
It's a whole body addressing.
So since you brought it up, I think because you made the distinction yesterday as well in the message, mental health and mental illness, spoken of as two separate things. Can you go ahead and define maybe what those things are?
We are all going to deal with mental health issues. It really is what it sounds like. The health of how we think about things, how we address things, how we behave. We're going to go through highs and lows, ups and downs. Mental health really is about the ability to cope with life in a balanced way. Mental illness is a very specific term, which really is kind of for meeting certain criteria. And there are a couple of books out there, essentially, that are the diagnostic manuals for this. And so in order to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, you've got to meet criteria out of this guide. And it's usually like 4 of the 9, and you have to have this one. So you can struggle in a season with your mental health and never be diagnosed with a mental illness. We're all going to struggle at times with mental health, but about 1 in 5 people will have an actual diagnosed mental illness. Many, you mentioned this in the sermon, don't get diagnosed, and so that number's probably higher.
Yeah.
But as we think about it, we do need to kind of differentiate those. People with a mental health struggle, often that will, as situations change or as maybe they begin doing some of the things that we're talking about today, that may alleviate in and of itself. People with a mental illness may have to do a little bit more. It may involve medication, meeting with a psychiatrist or a psychologist for some more testing. But there are different, they're almost think of a spectrum, and if you get far enough up that spectrum to where you're hitting certain criteria, then you've kind of stepped over into a mental illness.
Yeah, and I think it's imperative for not just our audience here to know the difference, but truly for the world to know the difference, because you could struggle in your mental health journey just as everybody does every day.
Sure.
And you do something that really is helpful for you. Like, let's say you get better sleep, or you decide not to drink that glass of wine before you go to bed, and or you decide to go to the gym, or whatever it is that you're doing. And then all of a sudden you think that you're armed with a knowledge that's going to fix somebody with a mental illness.
If it worked for me, it's going to work for them.
That's exactly right. And so you can almost say, well, no, this is the way. I have empirical, anecdotal evidence to say it fixed me, therefore it will fix you. Well, it may not, and more than likely it won't, because a mental illness is totally different than a mental health issue. Same spectrum, but way on the other side of it. So it's important for us to remember that. And so anything like this is just true as humans. It's not our job to fix people. It's our job to love them, to walk alongside them, to allow them to invite us in and to be a safe place for them to be able to express where they are and who they are and how they are, and for us just to love them there.
That's right.
So I do want to get into some questions here in a minute about how we might walk alongside someone that is struggling. But before we go there, just before we leave this topic, can you ever think of a time when all that was needed or is needed is spiritual intervention versus some type of professional help?
Yeah, that's a great question. So,
and how do we tell the difference between the two?
If I could liken it to again other types of illness, I have known people that would not have made it through a cancer diagnosis without the treatment that they got for cancer. That seemed to be the way that God healed in that person's life. I have known others that have had cancer and then gone back to the doctor and they're like, it's not here.
Yeah.
Okay. I have known people who struggle with maybe an alcohol addiction, that their journey was they had to keep going to groups because that was how God worked in their life. I've known others that would say I had the same type of struggle and then God just removed it. I don't know why he does it both ways.
That's right.
My hunch is this is really all about his glory, right? At the end of the day, whatever's going on is to glorify him. And I think he knows that in this person's life, I may receive the most glory by them on a long journey, being able to come to me daily for that strength to get through the day, and then telling a friend, this is how I'm getting through. And in this person's life, I may receive the most glory from it being a little more of what we would consider maybe a dramatic, he just removes it from them. Why he chooses this one over this one, again, he knows enough of the ins and outs of that, but I don't think it's always going to look the same for every person. There are certain types of mental illness, though, that I would say typically people don't get through those without some type of outside intervention. And so my general recommendation, if people are struggling with the symptoms, because most people aren't going to come in, of course, with ChatGPT and all the stuff. I mean, we all diagnose everything before we go talk to the doctor, right? Most people aren't going to come in and say, I have this illness. They're going to say, I have these symptoms. And generally, if people have enough of those symptoms, I'm going to say it's worth you going and having a full checkout with your doctor, because there are some medical difficulties, illnesses, or whatever that can mimic certain types of mental illness. I've had people that were on high doses of steroids that essentially got a steroid-induced psychosis, which feels very much like you've had a break with reality, but it's not coming from the same cause as some of the other mental illnesses. So Very often there's a trip to your doctor to rule out other things. But for certain symptoms, I'm almost always going to assume we're probably looking at this type of illness, which means you're going to need to see a psychiatrist, at least your doctor, maybe a psychiatrist in addition to that. Because there are some that it's just, you're probably not going to get through it just with, just praying yourself through it.
Yeah. So two questions that weren't on our prescribed, but I think it's really important for us to know, or at least our people listening to know. First question, both of them will be for you. First question is, what is the progression that somebody can take to receive help?
Yeah.
Is it okay to go to your pastors first, then to a counselor, or to go directly to a counselor, to go directly to a doctor?
Yeah.
That progression. And number two, what is the difference between a counselor and a psychiatrist?
Yeah. Great questions. Great questions. So, number one question, absolutely you can go to your pastor as a first. In fact, that is where many people start, is with their pastor, at least in the faith community. They will go and say, hey, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I am struggling and I need some help with this. So a pastor is often the first line of defense.
Any pastor. You do not have to knock down my door to come and get to Preston,
That's
so
right.
feel free.
So and one of the things I love about that is it allows the church to wrap around this person as part of their support network. And so I will often help people build out a network of people that they can lean on. And the way that I describe it is almost like if you feel like you're walking a tightrope and you're about to fall, you don't want one other tightrope down here that if you hit it just perfectly, you can save yourself, right? You want a net. You want a whole bunch of ropes tied together that if you fall, there's a much greater chance of you hitting something that's going to catch you, right? And so a pastor is often a part of that, someone in your life group, some other person in your world already that you can let in is often a part of that. But what will typically happen is they'll meet with a pastor. They may talk to a friend who says, you know what, I can walk with you on this journey and I'm willing to, but we probably need someone that works in this world a little bit more than I do to come alongside of you as well.
Right.
So I'm gonna speak in some generalities here, but I think it'll get the point. A counselor is going to be able to help you with working through your depression, your anxiety. They'll have some basic level of medication, but they can't prescribe medication. They're going to typically be able to give you some tools, some understanding, some education maybe about the things that you're struggling with that will be helpful. They are usually very well read in those areas, so they know some of the latest research that might help you. Even some of the stuff like helping you to know that the body's involved as much as your thought process. Right. So your counselor is going to be able to help with a lot of that. A psychologist can layer in some testing, because there are some tests that can be done to sort of rule this out or rule this in. So you may go to them to have a little more concrete testing, or are we dealing with this? This and this are very similar, so are we dealing with this or this? A psychiatrist is a medical doctor who has done some extra work in things that would relate to mental illness. And so they're usually more in the know on more recent maybe medications that are being developed, how these medications affect each other. So if you're already on some medication, they might be a little more in the know of, well, if we put you on this one, those are going to interact in a bad way. They don't do as much counseling typically, where you're going to sit with them maybe for an hour and kind of talk through how you're doing and what your week's been like and where you're trying to go. They're usually going to listen more for what are the symptoms and how's the medication helping you with those symptoms, and then do we need to adjust that a little bit. Some of your primary care docs will do that as well. Some of them are very comfortable in that world. They've done maybe some extra study on their own, or they did an extra rotation. Some are not as comfortable. That's an area that they say, I'd rather help you get to a psychiatrist. But there's a world in the mental health, mental illness side of things that involves multiple people. And sometimes you need just one of those people, and sometimes you need several of those people.
Right.
But I think a pastor, for those who are in the faith community, and actually even for people not in the faith community, they will often go to a pastor before they go to a counselor. There's just something in them knows, I'm struggling,
I know,
and I need help. And somehow going to the church and talking to a pastor seems like a good next step.
I'm learning a lot today. This is actually good. So, hey, let's shift gears a little bit for our last few minutes here. because we've talked a lot about people who might be struggling with some type of mental health or mental illness. But part of what we heard in the sermon was related to how we support or come alongside someone who may be struggling. So, and again, recognizing that many of us who grew up in the church, there has been historically a stigma attached to some of these things. What are some of the worst things that a well-meaning believer can do when they're encountered with someone who might be struggling in some way?
Yeah. You want me to go? Or you want
Go
to
ahead, Doctor.
I would say one of the worst things we can do is to over spiritualize it. You mentioned this in the sermon, to over spiritualize it and to try to make that person feel as though this is primarily a spiritual thing or only a spiritual thing, and that if they could just get it together spiritually,
That's right.
that it would go away. The person struggling typically is already feeling some of the weight of all of that. They're wrestling through it, and that just sort of adds, more to that. So, and the other thing I think is really anything that we do that is if you just do this, you're going to be fine, because we have not walked in that person's shoes. Very often those comments are being made without really knowing the full story of what's creating that illness in the person in the first place. There may be unresolved trauma that the person's never spoken about.
That's right.
We hear, I know you hear it, y'all hear it as pastors, very often people who say, I've never told anyone this in my entire life.
That's right.
Right. Well, if you're the person who doesn't know that's going on in that other person's life, you're giving advice without having the full story. So I think one of the things we should do is we should listen well and give them an opportunity to just talk through what's going on in a non-judgmental way, in a I'm here for you way. It's okay to not have all the answers.
That's right.
That's another thing is you don't, sometimes we feel as though at the end of the person speaking, we should be able with authority to say, well,
That's right.
here are the steps, and if you just do this, you'll move forward. It's okay to look at the person and say, I am so sorry for what you have been through, and my heart breaks for some of the pain that has caused, and I'm willing to walk this journey out with you, whatever that looks like. We may need to pull some other people in who might have some expertise in this, and I'll walk with you on that part of the journey too. We'll help find the right people to be on that support team, but you're not going to have to walk it alone.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big, because they already feel isolated in many cases. For them to know I have now voiced this, it's been received, not judged, and now I know there's someone else in the mix with me to help walk this out is huge. But you've done a lot of this.
No, I think a phrase that I use often, and even like I want you to hear me as pastor of Broadmoor Baptist Church and all the people that I sit with. This is a phrase that I use often, and it's absolutely true. I will say to them, it's the very same sentiment that you have. I don't have answers for you today, but I'm here with you.
Yeah.
And a lot of times
presence.
that is actually what they wanted more than an answer.
Yeah.
Because so far, to their experience, they will have gone to people, and the people will quickly try to fix them, because that's kind of our nature to do, right? We're fixers by nature. Or if they can't fix them, the next natural, in a not great way, thing that we do is run. Because it is scary and I don't know how to fix it. And it makes me feel, as the person who is receiving this information, inadequate. And I don't like to feel that way. So, I'm so sorry for you. Like we may utter those words and then we're gone. They text, they call, they whatever, and we ghost them. The worst thing we could do is that. I think the best thing we can do, we had a seminary professor, Dr. Bozeman. I don't know if you ever knew Dr. Bozeman.
I've heard you talk about Dr. Bozeman.
She was so great. She taught until she was 94 years old at New Orleans Seminary, and she taught the death, grief, and loss class. She was a social worker, but just an incredible woman of God. And she called it the ministry of presence, where you show up and shut up. And she used those words specifically. And she even told us, she was like, preachers, if I ever hear about you guys running your mouth when you don't need to, I'm going to pull your ear when I find you. And she would. She was one of those people. But truly the best thing, I think, that people can do, or at least have done for me, I'll use me, is when they're just there. And matter of fact, when they try to fix me, I get aggravated.
Yeah.
Even if I have something needing to be fixed,
Yeah.
I don't need them to fix it.
Yeah.
I just need them.
Yeah.
And I think
It's kind of that Job experience, right? I mean, Job's friends for a while, they do a great job. They just sit with him in the ashes, listen to him, and are with him.
That's right.
Then they start to talk, and
That's where
it
it
all
goes
falls
awry.
apart, right? And that's probably a good example in this case, because what they're essentially saying is this is a spiritual issue, which was true, but their idea of it was you've got sin, and that's the spiritual issue.
Right.
They had no idea what was going on behind the scenes, which was that it's a spiritual issue, and he's being attacked by Satan, right? And so they're missing a massive piece of the puzzle and giving answers as though they know what's really going on here.
Yeah.
But it all happened when they started advising and doing less listening. And we see that in the passage with Elijah. You know, God essentially lets Elijah just talk, like, what's going on? And he just talked it out. And then he asked him again, essentially, what's
It
going on?
says the same exact thing.
And
And both times are wrong.
Yeah, but it's where he is,
where
right?
he
He's
is.
just expressing what he's feeling. And I think back, so we are 30 years, I think we're 30 years out from the Wedgwood. This won't mean much to many listening, but there was a shooting at a church in Fort Worth, Wedgwood Baptist Church. I was in seminary when that happened. Some of our other counseling students went to that church. One actually was there and got shot. He made it through. But our counseling center at the seminary provided much of the counseling for people who had been a part of that. And most of us were just starting out. So we were like learning it and then walking in a room and doing it. But I remember one of our professors who had done a lot of crisis counseling training, and he just harped on the importance of them being able to share their experience. Like, don't walk in today and think you're about to tell them, here's the 5 things to do that are going to get you through this. Let them tell it, and then let them tell it again, and then let them tell it again, because that is part of their brain processing through what's going on. And each time they say it, even in them saying it and listening to themselves, they're going to get another piece of the puzzle. So the listening piece, I think, is critical. The walking with them piece, again, letting them know that they're not alone. Checking in, which you mentioned, which is not just check in one time and then be done with it.
Just continue.
But every now and then saying, hey, how's it going?
As I hear you, as I hear you talk about that specifically, going into a room and even as a young counselor, and thinking, okay, yeah, I just learned this. Here are the 5 things you need to do, and we got it. You know? But one of the things you pointed out, Josh, was that often our healing in these things is not linear, right? So you might experience a lot of progress and then see some regression maybe before you see ultimate healing. So it just reminded me of that. You know, I think
that's
even
not
as
uncommon.
people that walk alongside someone, to not be discouraged.
That's right.
If you see progress, well, it seems like progress, but then a regression, because it's just part of the healing process.
That's right.
That is so true. I find myself laughing on the inside, because even us as pastors and counselors, like, we know that, but we need to be reminded of that, because we'll have people who come and sit with us, and we'll feel like, yes, we're making progress. I'm a good counselor. This is great. And then the next time we show up, like, you're expecting, okay, we've had 3 weeks of great progress. They come in and it's like, we're back where we
wheels
started.
fell off.
What is going on? It certainly feels that way. So it is good to remember. Any healing process is not linear, but specifically the issue of mental health or mental illness journey of counseling, it is never linear.
It is never linear, and there are going to be ups and downs. I used to use the stock market. I don't know if that's a good example anymore, but the up and to the right, but with a lot of highs and lows as you're going, because that, in my experience, that is by far the more prevalent kind of trajectory, is making progress, moving in the right direction, but you can't look at it as every day should be better than yesterday. It's more like generally the season that I'm in is better than maybe the same season last year. And I do say season specifically because for some people, the literal seasons make a huge difference in how they feel, how they function, that sort of thing. So sometimes you can't compare to yesterday as much as, am I doing better this year with the season that I'm in than I did a year ago with that same season?
And sometimes having objective third parties to tell you truth is helpful, because in our states of maybe disordered thinking, we will think it's the worst. Or we're going to think we're never getting better. So I know it was the worst, and last year was way better. But then you have somebody who is able to speak into your life to say, hey, I hear you. Thank you. Can I remind you of some truth that I see?
That's right.
I saw this in you last year, but now I'm seeing this in you.
That's right.
And again, I don't think that's a fix. That's just an objective truth that we are asking them to consider understanding or seeing from a different vantage point.
And it's a helpful truth. And sometimes I take paper notes still, I'm old school, but sometimes I will flip back a year ago in someone's chart and say, hey, remember a year ago, you were dealing with this, and this is how it was going. So you may be feeling some of that same thing now, but you are dealing with it far different than you were a year ago. And sometimes, to your point, there's that moment of, okay, that's true. Yeah.
So we've almost run out of time, but I'm thinking ahead to next week when we'll be talking about another tough topic, the topic of addiction, and so which maybe it's I don't know if you planned it this way, but maybe it makes sense that we talked about mental health and then addiction, because I think maybe a lot of the addiction issues that people encounter come as a result of some mental health issues.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the conversation next week as well, and to see how these things tie together. So a couple things, additional resources that we want people to know about is this Wednesday night. So we're recording this on Monday morning, October 13th, for those who might be listening at some point in the future. We have one of our church members, who also happens to be a brilliant guy, is going to be speaking on Wednesday night about a related topic, mostly as it centers around anxiety and those sorts of things. And I think a lot of this is going to be geared toward parents of kids and teenagers.
Yeah. And a lot of it's technology, social media, and just the impact that has on us and our mental health.
Yeah. So if that's a topic that interests any of our listeners, we want to encourage you to be there and to be a part of that. One other thing we want to mention is that as a church, we've got Serve Weekend coming up, and so it's going to be an exciting time for people in our church to go out into the community in lots of different places and to make an impact and help with some of the people that serve, that serve our city and our community day in, day out.
Yeah.
And just need our help. So we want to encourage people to sign up for that. You can find a link in the show notes or you can go to our website and you can find out about it. So we'd love people to be involved. So, any other final thoughts we want to leave people with before we sign off?
I think the only final thought that I would say is, if this is part of your story, seek help. You don't have to do it alone.
That's right.
And so many people wait for so many years to ask, and those are years that could have been, better years at least. Yeah. And so just seek help. Yeah. Talk to someone. There's help available.
And seek Preston Crow. He's great.
Well, and I think that's a great point, because Preston, you run the Center for Hope and Healing, which is a part of Broadmoor's ministry here, and so that is a great place for people to go.
It is a great place for people to go. And again, if you're not a member of Broadmoor, that's okay. We see people that are not members. In fact, about 70% of those who come to the Center for Hope and Healing are not Broadmoor members. So we welcome people from all around.
Yeah, that's great. Guys, great conversation today.
Love you guys.
Thank you. Hope that numbness is wearing off.
It is so close. Now we're just kind of like numb right here. We're good. We're getting close.
Better and better. That's great. Love you guys.